My cancer wife is pushing me away, I just want her in my arms. My wife got cancer and is leaving me. I'm distraught. My wife and I were dating 10 years before we married in June 2022. So we've been together for about 11 years now. Matched for 15 months now. 2 weeks after our wedding, my wife was diagnosed with a super rare form of appendix cancer that is as aggressive as you can get. So she ended up in the hospital last July at Sloan Kettering in New York, fighting for her life because the cancer had spread so dramatically that everyone thought she was going to die. I ended up spending hundreds of hours researching a surgeon who would take her case on to debulk some of the tumors. I finally found a great surgeon in Pittsburgh who opened her up and spent 13 hours taking out tumors from her midsection. She recovered from that surgery back in January, and she went into remission for no more than 4 weeks before they started to see the cancer coming back. They then told her she would be on heavy chemotherapy until she died. She's had about 20 rounds total of Fofox and Fofree, and honestly, probably more than that. The doctor said it only works for a year or two until the cancer takes over. They gave her about a year to live. In her most recent oncologist appointment, she approached me the other day and said she wanted to separate and spend her remaining days in her home. Friends in New York for a better support system. I work from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily and sometimes hit the gym after work. She never really made a life outside of the house because she always feels so crappy from chemo. She says she feels lonely and needs a support system. So, no big deal, right? I offered to move up there with her, but she says she wants me to move on and actually start a family with someone else. She says she doesn't want me waking up one random day when I'm 37. I'm 32 right now, by the way, and have no family and a dead wife. I told her that she is my life and I wanna spend the rest of it with her. She still denies me from coming. I've sat her down for 5 straight days trying to plead with her to let me come to at least take care of her on her bad days, but she says it has to be this way. I'm so distraught. I don't know what else to do to save this marriage. I've tried everything. The more I bring up trying to keep the wedding, the more she wants to end it. Recently, she's been very distant and has planned a date for her to get on a plane to New York for good. October 27th. She said she would stay until the date to help me with anything I needed to get moved out. My own. Whenever I try to hug or kiss her on the cheek, she is uncomfortable. We've been together for 11 years, and it's all gone. What is my best course of action if I want to save this marriage? Or do I just let her go? I just want to be with her on her final days. After fighting with the bus driver and the assistant principal for most of the year, revenge came as a police fundraiser. They were advertising it on the local TV news and local radio stations. If you put someone up for arrest, the cops would show up and throw someone in handcuffs and put them in jail until they could call a few people and fundraise the bail. The person who set the arrest had to pay $10, but it was worth it. After being annoyed by Pat and Karen all year, my mom put Karen, the assistant principal, up for arrest. The cops showed up and took her to the room where she could call her friends and raise the money for her to go. The idea was that mom would keep her arrested as long as possible. No one would give her the bail money, not even for charity. So she missed most of a day sitting in the police precinct trying to get anyone to put up enough money for her to leave. Eventually, the cops told my mom that they had to let her go because it had gone on too long. She was the only one who didn't raise the bail money that day. Letting her know precisely how much she meant to everyone at the school felt great. I had a friend who heard her complaining about it later that day. She had called the principal, who donated some, but the other teachers gave nothing, and none of her friends would help. She apparently thought one of the teachers put her up for it. It's so minor and so petty it almost doesn't count. But when I left school at the end of the year, Mom asked her, "How was jail?" Before we walked away for the last time. This is the first time I ever heard a ray sound from a human. What's the scariest thing in the entire world? Rabies. It's exceptionally common, but people just don't run into the animals that carry it often. Let me paint you a picture. You go camping, and at midday you decide to take a nap in a nice little hammock. While sleeping, a tiny brown bat decides to bite in your sleep. His teeth are tiny. Hardly enough to even break the skin, but he does manage to give you the equivalent of a tiny scrape that goes completely unnoticed. You wake up, none the wiser. If you notice anything at the bite site at all, you assume you just lightly scraped it on something. The bomb has been lit, and your nervous system is the wick. The disease will multiply along your nervous system, doing virtually no damage, and completely undetectable. You literally have no symptoms. It may be 4 days, it may be a year, but the camping trip is most likely long forgotten. Then one day you get a slight headache. At this point, you're already dead. There is no cure. There's no treatment. It has a 100% unalive rate. So what does that look like? Your headache turns into a fever, and a general feeling of being unwell. You're fidgety, uncomfortable and scared. As the virus that has taken its time getting into your brain finds a vast network of nerve endings, it begins to rapidly reproduce, starting at the base of your brain, where your pons is located. This is the part of the brain that controls communication between the rest of the brain and body, as well as sleep cycles. Next you become anxious. You still think you have only a mild fever, but suddenly you find yourself becoming scared, even horrified, and it doesn't occur to you that you don't know why. This is because the disease is chewing up your amygdala. As your cerebellum becomes hot with the virus, you begin to lose muscle coordination and balance. You think maybe it's a good idea to go to the doctor now, but assuming a doctor is smart enough to even run the tests necessary in the few days you have left on the planet, odds are they'll only be able to tell your loved ones what you died of later. You're twitchy, shaking and scared. You have the normal fear of not knowing what's going on, but with the virus really effing the amygdala this is amplified 100-fold. It's around this time the hydrophobia starts. You're terribly thirsty, you just want water. But you can't drink. Every time you do, your throat clamps shut and you vomit. This has become a legitimate, active fear of water. You're thirsty, but looking at a glass of water begins to make you gag and shy back in fear. The contradiction is hard for your hot brain to see at this point. By now, the doctors will have to put you on IVs to keep you hydrated, but even that's futile. You were dead the second you had a headache. You begin hearing things, or not hearing at all as your thalamus goes. You taste sounds, you see smells, everything starts feeling like the most horrifying substance trip anyone has ever been on. With your hippocampus long under attack, you're having trouble remembering things, especially family. You're alone, hallucinating and thirsty, confused and undeniably terrified. Everything scares the literal crap out of you at this point. These strange people in lab coats. These strange people standing around your bed crying, who keep trying to get you to drink something and crying. And it's only been about a week since that little headache that you've completely forgotten. Time means nothing to you anymore. Funny enough, you now know how the bat felt when he bit you. Eventually, you slip into the dumb phase. Your brain has started the process of shutting down. Too much of it has been turned to liquid virus. Your face droops. You drool. You're unaware of what's around you. A sudden noise or light might startle you, but for the most part, all you can do is just stare at the ground. You haven't really slept for about 72 hours. Then you die. Always, you die.
My evil mother-in-law ended up getting exactly what she wanted. To put it mildly, I was done with her antics and she was uninvited to the wedding. My fiancé explained it to the rest of his family, leaving out any mention of my wealth, and they all turned on her for the things she'd said and done. I'd met the rest of his family slowly over the years and they'd all liked me, his mother seeming to be the only one with a problem. When we got married, it was a little over a month after we originally wanted, but we just told everyone we dragged our feet a little on the booking of the venue. His mother did not attend, but the rest of his family did, and we're all happy for us. We spent a few happy years together, barely hearing from his mother. As we approached 30 though, I found myself more and more okay with not having children, whereas my husband wanted a couple. We got counseling, we talked endlessly, and after a heartbreaking few months of towing the line, we amicably decided to divorce. He wanted kids and I didn't, there just wasn't a way to compromise on that. We announced it to his family together, many tears were shed by all, but it was overall probably one of the most peaceful divorces you could ever see. It only took 2 days for his mother to show up on my doorstep. With the sheriff. While hubby was at work. I was flabbergasted. When I opened the door, I was wide-eyed and had no idea what to do, but the sheriff stepped forward and handed me a piece of paper. I have to admit, when I read the bold print at the top while she smugly watched me, I ended up laughing out loud. Almost doubled over and laughing so loud the poor officer probably thought I was insane for a second. I looked at her, still laughing as she looked angry and confused, and addressed her directly for the first time in almost half a year. "Mother-in-law, are you seriously trying to evict me from my own home?" That's right, she had handed me an eviction notice. I handed it back to the sheriff, asked him to please stay where he is, and shut the door before she could respond. I don't know what she said, but her wailing could be heard loudly and clearly as I walked through the house to my office. When I went back out, I handed the sheriff the deed to my home and he looked it over while she looked over his shoulder. The sheriff did not look amused as he glanced towards her multiple times. In my county, at the time, you had to have a law enforcement officer sign off that an eviction notice had been delivered in person before you could actually take a tenant to court to fully evict. So basically, whatever she thought she was doing, what she was actually doing was wasting this guy's time with whatever lies she told to get him here. He hands me back the deed, rips the eviction notice in half, and starts questioning why she thinks she can just evict the owner from their own home. "You need to get out. Get out of my son's house," she shouted that and other incoherent things at me instead, and I rolled my eyes, almost amused still, and stepped inside while the sheriff started giving her a talking down. I left the door slightly open, but she didn't try to come in, nor did the sheriff, as I went ahead and texted my husband to let him know what was happening while going back to my office. When I emerged once more, the sheriff had a look on his face of someone who was absolutely done, but I was as well, and I'd already decided to burn this last bridge. See, the real reason our wedding was delayed was because we'd moved the date to see a lawyer. "I'm not leaving my house, but I will give you one thing that'll make you happy," I told her as I opened the door, and she looked uncertain but didn't want to say too much with an officer of the law standing right next to us. "We got that prenup you wanted, do you want to read it?" She practically tore the papers. She snatched them from my hand so fast and she looked so pleased with herself up until it got to the point of splitting assets. To put it simply, my sister had me watch her baby with RSV without telling me he had RSV. I'm livid. My sister has 3 boys, her youngest just over 3 months old. I have a 16-month-old daughter who was born 9 weeks early and spent 8 weeks in the NICU due to her early arrival. She has a CHD in her lungs, have still not matured fully, and we see a cardiologist and pulmonologist every 8 weeks. A few weeks ago, I watched her baby for her, and a drop-off noticed he had a bit of a runny nose. Okay, guess it happens, you know? A few days later, my daughter got sick. Sick as a dog. Fever, awful running nose, fussy as could be. I was a little upset, but cults were going around, and again, babies got sick. It happens. Well, fast forward to this past Saturday. She asked if my husband and I could watch him while they moved. I said yes. She brings him by at a drop-off and says he still has a slight cough from last time left over, but it's not awful. I just wanted to let you know the doctor gave us cough meds, and we just gave him some a bit ago. Okay, cool. Fantastic. Again, I was a little irritated because she could have LED with this when asking me to watch him, but it was a small call from past illness. Again, I thought nothing huge of it, and maybe that is my fault. Fast forward to today. My daughter is acting fine as of right now. I will mention I got a call from my mom. My sister has spent all night in the hospital with her baby. Who is RSV? She told my mom. She was there with him Friday and was told it was RSV. She found out Friday that he had RSV and then had me watch him on Saturday with my immunocompromised child. How inconsiderate and irresponsible could you possibly be? To put someone else's child at risk? To put my child at risk? I fear for the health of her baby, but I fear for my daughters. Worse. Now, I'm not sure she would be able to handle RSV. And she's already been through so much. I'm so angry. I feel like this has burned the bridge between me and her. I don't think I will ever watch her kids for her again.
My boyfriend cheated on me, so I convinced him to get matching tattoos. I left the parlor after he got it first. This happened 5 years ago when I was 19. He was 22 and the second boyfriend I've ever had. I was head over heels in love with him. But looking back, he was just a good pickup artist and knew how to push my buttons. Especially considering he was older and a lot more experienced than me. We have been together for almost a year when a random girl from our university DM'd me one day. You don't know me, and I am sorry to tell you this, but I've been sleeping with your boyfriend for 5 months now. He always told me he was single, but I recently got suspicious and went through his phone. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the point. I was utterly heartbroken and felt like such an idiot. Now it all made sense why he was super busy half the time and could not see me. What I was more upset about was the fact that he blatantly lied to me throughout the relationship, swearing that he was monogamous and expected the same for me. And I was. After my emotions had more or less settled after a couple of days, I invited that girl, let's call her Caitlin, to a coffee shop. She agreed to meet and tell me everything she knows. Long story short, Caitlin saw on his phone that he was dirty texting many girls, and from quickly scrolling through most of the chats, it was clear he was screwing at least 4, me included. Caitlin said that she and the other 2 girls were just friends with benefits, but he did not mention at least to her that he has a girlfriend and he is cheating. Caitlin did not care about the other girls, they were treated the same way, they were just friends with benefits. But I was in a serious relationship with him and had no idea what was happening. After discovering this, I got furious. I felt so played and manipulated. The grown-up thing would have been to confront him, tell him he's a jerk, and just leave. But I was 19 and could not just leave it like that. I wanted to mess with his mind, too. I'm not the one who came up with a matching tattoo idea. It was my best friend. After I shared this story and told her, I was pissed off and wanted revenge. He already had plenty of tattoos, so getting another one would not be too crazy. So, I thought I might actually pull this off. The next time I saw my boyfriend, I pretended nothing had happened and acted as if I was in love with him even more. I started dropping seeds in his mind, mentioning that I was thinking about getting my first tattoo, maybe even his name, etc., which he loved, by the way. His ego was getting more than he could handle. Long story short, in about 2 weeks, we went to a tattoo parlor. My best friend secretly waited nearby in her car, and I told her to pick me up when she saw me step outside the shop. My plan was this. Go there, act a bit scared, and do an excellent old switcheroo. Play with his ego to put him on the spot. I framed it something along the lines of, I really want to do it, but I'm a scared little girl. Oh, my gosh, we're actually doing this. Is it going to hurt? I need a big, strong man to show me first, etc. And guess what? It worked like a charm. Did not take too long for him to go first and get my name tattooed on the side of his ribs with a big, robust, cool guy smirk on his face. As soon as the tattoo was finished, I just casually left the parlor, saying, I know you've been cheating on me. Dumb. He was about to run after me, but the tattoo artist stopped him because he needed to pay. The timing was just perfect. My friend parks in front of the shop. I jump in the car, and as we leave, my boyfriend runs out and sees us driving off with my middle finger in the car window. I blocked him. Gave him zero closure. Ignored all of his attempts to reach out. Was this too ruthless? Maybe childish? He probably got the tattoo covered with something else as soon as possible, but just knowing that I made him do that made me feel warm and fuzzy.
I lost my best friend to a 3-way. So I had this girl who was my bestie, and literally I loved her so much as a friend. She is so smart, beautiful, kind, caring, etc. But she cut me off from being her friend completely after this happened. She had a boyfriend of 2 years and asked me to join to be 1/3 for a trio. I was interested in trying something new for the first time, and I was abstinent for more than a year, so I thought this would be a cool way to break that abstinence. And she was my friend, so I felt super comfortable with her. And no, she'd never put me in danger. Also, me and her are bisexual. We do the 3-way and everything is fine for like 3 years afterwards. During this time, I find a boyfriend and break up with him and she finds a new man and is with him currently. After my breakup, I go through some of my old Instagram DMs that I never checked because I was in a relationship and would never cheat. So I see this one of a man who has multiple messages saying I'm so beautiful and he'd love to take me to bougie dinner places where I live. And a bonus is no one I know is following him even though we both live in the same city. I scope him out to make sure he's not a creepy person, etc. And we go on the gorgeous dinner date, and at the end, he says, "I'm a bit sad you don't remember me." I'm totally confused. And I keep reassuring him I don't know him and he's probably mistaken me for someone else. And then he says he's my friend's ex-boyfriend. At this point was 5 years ago that I had a three-way with. Honest to God, I didn't know that was my best friend's ex, or I wouldn't have even responded to the messages in the first place. Anyways, during the date, I tell him that I'm gonna tell my friend because I want her to know the truth. He advises against it because he says she will be jealous, but I think she will understand it was an honest mistake. So I tell her, and she's like, okay. She doesn't believe me that I didn't know who he was. She's extremely mad. And I kept telling her that the only time I ever saw him was when I was with her. She didn't bring boyfriends around me or her friends or post them. She was really private. So I don't understand how she'd assume I would magically know his Instagram name and remember his face after 5 years. I also want to remind you that she has been with her new man for like 3 years now. And I was with mine as well up until we recently broke up. So I was not thinking of anyone except my ex-boyfriend. First she just didn't respond to my messages apologizing and telling her I was telling the truth, etc. I gave her space for like a week. Then it was Christmas. So I sent a long Christmas message, again apologizing, hoping we could be friends again. Again, no reply. Fast forward to the summer and I remembered her birthday. So I messaged her again saying, why are we throwing a 5-year friendship away for a man you're not even with anymore? And what happened to girls before brothers, etc. And still no reply. So I understood it was finally over. But I still miss her regularly and I'm still hurt that our friendship is over because of one date in a three-way several years ago that she asked me to be a part of and he did not tell me until during the date who he was.
Giving us all the overtime we want is not a good idea. This happened a couple years ago when I was 19 to 20, somewhere around then. As a wee lad I got a job working at a local superstore while attending college. I was a cashier. It sucked but honestly wasn't as bad as it could have been. My immediate manager helped protect the cashiers from the higher-ups, but those are war stories for another day. As time went on, as it does, eventually the dreaded holiday season came around, Thanksgiving week to be exact. I got the week off of school due to the holidays and was scheduled to work a juicy 40 hours that week, but unfortunately was scheduled to work all Thanksgiving and Black Friday. My schedule had Thursdays off, but Thanksgiving falls on a Thursday and I was being forced to work. The good news is at least they fed us a ton of food in the break room. That was honestly nice. But I was bummed that I had to miss the holiday with family since I had prepared to have the day off as I thought I would. Now, before we get into the MC, a quick note. The store did not allow overtime. You were given extra lunches, sent home early, whatever they had to do to avoid paying out. If you got OT, you were either lucky or you had a major problem you were being made to handle. Management was salaried, and the enlisted workers were lucky to get 38+ hours. No extra money for the folks in the trenches. As we are a major store that caters to everything from groceries to electronics, we prepare for a very long week that tends to mark the hustle and bustle of the holiday season as a whole. The energy is pretty low as we all really dread this time of year, and I am extra nervous. This is my first retail job in the front lines during the holidays, and I heard of all the horror stories about what is coming. The store manager gathers up a lot of the workers for a quick announcement that Monday. He tells us that essentially, we are really behind and have a ton of work to do, and this is going to be a rough and wild week. So, he is authorizing any and all OT across all departments from today until Sunday. He told the managers and department heads that if an employee wanted to work, let them work. We need the coverage. Later on, we would discover what he meant was letting us come in on our days off to work an extra shift or two, tack on a nice 8 hours to our paychecks. Whoops. If an employee wants to work a shift, let them work. Did we want to work? Let me tell you, we went crazy. I pulled 6 doubles that week. Someone parked their RV in the parking lot and worked what had to most likely be forbidden due to labor laws. People were working maximum hours. One day I worked so long our manager gave me 3 lunch breaks. Dozens of people jumped at this opportunity. The next day I came in and saw the overnight guys still petering around. We milked that week for every hour, every cent of possible overtime. I don't recall all the numbers and such directly, but I think I went from a 72-hour paycheck to one that had about 118, and around 42 was OT, which was 1.5x paid. It's been a few years, but those numbers feel right. Also, if you work on Thanksgiving, you are given a single-use 25% off coupon to use in the store on one big order. Since I used my overtime on stuff to buy in the store, it felt like I earned an extra 25% on top of that. Management let it happen. No one said anything to SM that week and he sat in his office. It was 2 days after that week that some corporate suits showed up and gave him a verbal beating when they realized he blatantly authorized that. I think early on he realized his mistake, but the die was cast, and truth be told we did need to get the work done. All that OT and we barely were ready for the open door on Black Friday. He was mad, shouted at a couple managers after he got yelled at asking why they let us work so much, but they just shrugged. If an employee wants to work a shift, let them. It was immediately dropped, and was clear it would never be allowed again, and
The middle school Hitler finds out no one likes her. At my middle school, a vice principal fancied herself a dictator. Any tiny bit of power she got was an issue. But I was a middle schooler at the time and a good kid, not often in trouble, so I didn't cross her path until 8th grade. Her friend was a bus driver named Pat. For 6th and 7th grade years, we had an excellent bus driver. He was pleasant to the kids, let us put the windows down when the Georgia heat got too much, etc. But he retired, and the bus driver we got was a furious middle-aged woman named Pat who did not like children and made it clear every day the windows stayed up, or we went back to the school. She would yell as she had the only fan blowing in her face on a 100-plus-degree school bus. Ostensibly, this was to keep us from throwing things out of the bus, but that was never an issue before or after. The real reason was that before the bus driver could leave at the end of the day, all the windows had to be backed up and locked. So, this saved her effort. My bus stop was the first she drove by but the last to pick up, and it had been that way for years. That changed this, and she decided she only wanted to stop on the first pass by and kept threatening to leave the kids in my neighborhood. We made her stop twice. I first got on the Karen vice principal's radar because Pat left me on a bustling road one morning. She could have stopped but wagged her finger at me as she drove away and left me. I flipped off the kids, laughing at me out of the back window. But the bus driver, Pat, thought I was flipping her off. I didn't get suspended because she left me with no way to get to school on the side of a bustling road. And my mom threatened to sue if it happened again. But after that, they had it out for me. Pat tried several times to get me on anything. She even coached the kid to say I bullied him. But when the principal brought in the kid, he said he was my friend. It was those other kids and a bunch of other little crap. Anything to get me in trouble. So, the petty revenge comes in here. I was doing my best to make the bus driver's life hell in passive-aggressive ways. She got annoyed at anything, so it was easy. But Karen found it more challenging to do anything, too. After fighting with the bus driver and the assistant principal for most of the year, revenge came as a police fundraiser. They were advertising it on the local TV news and local radio stations. If you put someone up for arrest, the cops would show up and throw someone in handcuffs and put them in jail until they could call a few people and fundraise the bail. The person who set the arrest had to pay $10, but it was worth it. After being annoyed by Pat and Karen all year, my mom put Karen, the assistant principal, up for arrest. The cops showed up and took her to the room where she could call her friends and raise the money for her to go. The idea was that mom would keep her arrested as long as possible. No one would give her the bail money, not even for charity. So she missed most of a day sitting in the police precinct trying to get anyone to put up enough money for her to leave. Eventually, the cops told my mom that they had to let her go because it had gone on too long. She was the only one who didn't raise the bail money that day. Letting her know precisely how much she meant to everyone at the school felt great. I had a friend who heard her complaining about it later that day. She had called the principal, who donated some, but the other teachers gave nothing, and none of her friends would help. She apparently thought one of the teachers put her up for it. It's so minor and so petty it almost doesn't count. But when I left school at the end of the year, Mom asked her, "How was jail?" before we walked away for the last time. This is the first time I ever heard a ray sound from a human.